beneficiary families. Shop around and see if you can get the worst quality.
I call Dr. Rajin Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to take another call on this particular part of the bill. Just to repeat that all of the consequential changes that are being made under Part 2 are because of what's been approved under Part 1. So there is a link between what Part 2 is doing and our discussion about the provisions of Part 1. And in particular, I want to talk about Clause 64 and 65. This is what I'll be referring to. It's interesting that one of the things that has happened in this bill, Mr. Chairman, is and something we haven't talked a lot about in the debates on Part 1, and this is that sole parents have to be available for work, or they no longer qualify, rather, for sole parent benefits when their youngest child turns 14. So now, for the first time, we have this new rule that at age 14 is when parents no longer are really that responsible for bringing up the children, or something is being said here about bringing up teenagers. So you could have a 16, 15 and 14-year-old, and the moment the youngest one turns 14, you're unable to qualify for sole parent benefit. Now, so what is it saying about how we bring up our children? And how do we, and why is it that this minister and this government places so little emphasis on the 14-year-old, the care of the 14-year-old? So that the redefinition of sole parent benefit actually has this impact. And I believe that quite often, that for many, many parents, that's a much more demanding time, particularly when you have more than one teenager. It's a time when young people are testing all the boundaries. It's a time when parents, and in this case a sole parent, would want to be home, but now they have to be available for work. They no longer can access this particular benefit. And that's a change that's been made, hasn't been a lot of debate about, but it's one that concerns me because it leads me to ask the question, the changes that are being made, the consequential changes in the Part 2, Mr. Chairman, what does it say about the optimum environment or the best environment for bringing up children? Because it's very hard to find anything in this bill entirely and in the consequential changes under Part 2 that actually is about creating a better environment in which parents or a sole parent can bring up a child. And I wonder, Mr. Chairman, whether this government has any focus on that. And in fact, that's a worry, because we do know, Mr. Chairman, the set of conditions under which children do much better. It has to do with what happens in the home, it has to do with what happens in the community, the provision of social policy, and the way in which we see, society sees parents bringing up children. But this government, for this group of parents who are bringing up their children, has now put so many obstacles in the way that I wonder what does it say about the optimum environment for bringing up children. And I rather suspect that the minister has tried to muzzle some of her own speakers, and it's a surprise that a couple of them did sneak in a call. But when they did, speaking to the consequential changes that are being made in Part 2, that because of the decisions in Part 1, they did indeed expose the government's own thinking. I wondered what Sam Lottinger was saying when he said the purpose of this bill is really to reduce the amount of people on the cost of benefits. That's his honor. I think the chairman of the Social Service Select Committee is actually honest about that, because that is the underlying belief. It's not about creating a better environment for our children. It's not about parents providing the parents in difficult circumstances, vulnerable parents, bringing up the children, but it's about saving money. And that's all that member was talking about. Melissa Lee, and every time she speaks on bills like this, does make a fool of herself, because here she was saying, again, I know, here she was saying she did it, and therefore it's okay for every sole parent to use childcare and do what this bill is saying because she was able to do it. What Melissa Lee does not tell us was that she was middle class, had the financial resources, was a businesswoman, had a mum living at home as well. There are a whole bunch of other circumstances. So what Melissa Lee is saying, it was good for her, and therefore is good for the sole parents who are vulnerable themselves. So I think there's good reason why the minister's muzzled his side from talking about this, but the consequential changes themselves in part 2 of this particular bill really carries on the negative impact. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I call Mike Saban.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, very pleased to take short call on the second part of the bill. Mr. Chairman, there's been